Alright, we are going to do our second video on Objective 124 today. So this is video 2 on Objective 124. So we're going to start with example number 5. And example number 5 says, what two integers is r between if negative 3.2 equals r minus 1? So the first thing that we should do as we go through this is look and say, alright, what is the ultimate question being asked? What is the question we're trying to answer? So I'm going to zoom in on this one. And the ultimate question that we're asking is, what two integers is r between? That's the final question we're trying to answer. Let's think for a second what that's going to be about. Well, an integer is a whole number. An integer is a whole number. So we're looking for a whole number, two whole numbers that our value of r is between. So in order to answer this question, we're going to need to first figure out what r is. And in order to do that, we're going to need to solve our equation. So I'm going to rewrite the equation we have. It's negative 3.2 is equal to r minus 1 over 2. And just like we learned previously, we're going to use our do and our undo box to solve this two-step equation. So I'm going to make my do and my undo box over here. The first step, the first thing I see happening to r is that we are subtracting 1. So to undo that, I'm going to add 1. The next thing I see happening to r is that we are dividing by 2. So I'm going to multiply by 2. Now that I have my do and my undo box, I'm going to go ahead and solve this equation, doing the do and the undo box backwards. So first I'm going to multiply by 2 on both sides. Okay, remember you're really multiplying by 2 over 1, the reciprocal. These are going to cancel. On the right hand side, I'm going to be left with r minus 1. Negative 3.2 times 2, or 2 over 1, gives me a negative 6.4. Now, I've simplified. I've done my times 2 step. My next thing I want to do is I want to add 1 to both sides. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. These cancel out. I'm left with r equals negative 6.4 plus 1 gives me a negative 5.4. So I've done both of my do and my undo steps. So my answer is r is negative 5.4. Now we're not done with this question. Remember, we circled up at the top what our final question was. Before we answer that, let's quickly check our answer. That's one of the most important parts because we want to make sure we get the right answer. So my original equation was negative 3.2 equals r minus 1 over 2. So I'm going to check by putting in negative 5.4 for r. If we put that into our calculators, if we do that by hand, we're going to get that negative 3.2 equals negative 3.2. That's correct. Alright, so let's go up and let's answer our final question. We're trying to figure out what two integers is the value of r in between. Remember, we talked about integers are whole numbers. So I want you to imagine a number line and think about where would this number, negative 5.4, fall. Okay, we know it's going to be with the negative numbers because it's a negative 5.4. But where would it fall? Would it fall between a negative 5 and a negative 6? Or a negative 5 and a negative 4? Well, it's greater than 5. It's bigger than a negative 5. And remember, when we think about negative numbers, 5.4 is going to be in between 5 and 6. Okay, it's going to be negative 5.4 is actually smaller than negative 5 because it's a negative. So our answer is that it's going to be in between negative 5 and negative 6. So that's our final answer. All right, let's do another example. Go over here where it says example 6. So again, I'm going to use cups as I read. If negative 2a minus b equals 20, what is the value of negative 3a when b equals 10? So again, let's figure out what the final question we're trying to answer is. And the final question we're answering is, what is the value of negative 3a? Now it told us if negative 2a minus b equals 20, and it told us b equals 10. So the first thing we're given this equation. Negative 2a minus b equals 20. Now I'm looking at this equation, and I notice that in this equation I have two unknown variables, a and b. In order to actually solve this, I have to know what one of them is. So I have to know what one of them is as a number. And this problem actually told us. It told us that b was 10. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this, and I'm going to substitute in 10 for b. Now, I'm going to use parentheses when I substitute. We've talked about in the past, you always use parentheses when you substitute. I can drop those parentheses, though, because if we look, there's a hidden 1 right here, and negative 1 times 10 is the same as just saying minus 10. So you get a minus 10. Now we have a two-step equation. I'm going to go ahead and make my do and my undo box. So the first thing I notice happening to to A is that it's being multiplied by negative 2. So I'm going to have to divide by negative 2. The next thing I see happening is that it's subtracting 10. So to undo that, I'm going to have to add 10. I'm going to go ahead and solve. First, I'm going to add 10 to both sides. This cancels. I haven't done anything with my negative 2a, so I'm going to bring that down. 20 plus 10 is 30. I've done this step. Next, I need to divide by negative 2. Divide both sides by negative 2. I'm left with a equals negative 15. Now, again, make sure, go back up to the question and see, is that my final answer, or did I have to do anything else? I did. I had to. The ultimate question we're asking is this one. What is the value of negative 3a? So before you do it, check your answer. If we check our answer, we would see that it's correct. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put negative 3, and in for a, I'm going to put negative 15, which gives me a negative 45. So my final answer is negative 45. All right, let's do one more example. Okay. And this one has a lot of words in it, so we're going to definitely have to use cups. It says for an irregular hexagon has 6 sides. That's probably important. An irregular hexagon has 6 sides that are not all equivalent. Ms. Muzakiotis measured a hexagon and found the average side length of the hexagon were 22 centimeters. So the average side lengths were 22 centimeters. She measured 5 of the sides and found out they were 18, 25, 22, and 17. How many side lengths are missing? And find the lengths of those missing side lengths. Okay, so we have a lot of information here. Let's kind of digest what we're given. The first thing I notice when I see this is I'm given a shape, and I'm given some of that shape's lengths, the side lengths. And for me, the easiest thing for me to do is just draw a picture. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to draw a picture of what's given. So I have a shape that has 6 sides, okay? So I'm just going to draw a shape that has 6 sides. It says it's irregular, so our shapes sizes don't all have to match our sides. And I'm going to fill in the missing sides, the sides that I have, So I have an 18, I have a 25, I have a 22, a 23, a 17. Okay. Now when I fill this out, one of our questions we're trying to answer is how many side lengths are missing. And I notice once I've filled out my picture that one of my side lengths is missing. So I want you to think about what could we use to represent a missing side length. Yeah, we could use a variable to represent our missing side length. So I'm going to make this missing side length an x. So how many side lengths are missing? 1. We have 1 missing side. 1 missing side. So there's the answer to our first question. Now the second question says, find the length of the side lengths, the one that's missing. Let's think about the other piece of information that we were given. We were also told that the average side lengths of the hexagon were 22. So I'm thinking, okay, what is average? How do you find the average? Well, if I remember from a previous objective, the average of something is the sum of its numbers divided by the number of terms. That gives me an average. So what I'm thinking is, if I know the average is 22, because that's what it told me up here, could I add up how many there are and divide by how many sides there are? So let's set that up as a problem. So I'm going to set this up over on the right-hand side. We're going to move this over a little bit. So we have our side lengths. So I'm going to add up these side lengths from over here. We had an 18 plus 25 plus 22 plus 23 plus 17. I'm going to have to move my thing over a little bit. Okay. And then our last side length was an X. Our last side length was an X. And I'm going to move this over here, but remember, you have the picture still on yours, so you can look at that. Let's make this look more like a 23. Right? My last side length with X, because that's the one we don't know. Over how many terms I have, or how many sides I have, which is 6. That's going to equal my average side length, which is 22. Now I have an equation that I can solve. Now you'll notice up here at the top, we do have some like terms. Okay, we have a bunch of constants, an 18, a 25, 22, 23, 17. So before we go any further, let's simplify that by adding all those constants together. So I'm going to add 18 plus 25 plus 22 plus 23 plus 17, and I get 105. So I'm going to rewrite this equation as 105 plus x, because we haven't figured that out, over 6 equals 22. Now I have a two-step equation, so I'm going to go ahead and create my do and my undo box. The first thing that I notice happening to x is that we're adding 105. So first thing, we add 105. So I'm going to have to subtract 105. The next thing I notice is that we're dividing by 6. So I'm going to multiply by 6. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to multiply both sides by 6. These are going to cancel. Remember, we really are multiplying by 6 over 1. I'm left with, on the right-hand side, 105 plus x equals 22 times 6, or 22 times 6 over 1, which is 132. Next, I need to subtract 105. So these are going to cancel, and I'm left with x equals 132 minus 105, which is 27. So our side length that is missing is 27. Now you can easily check this one of two ways. You can take this 27, plug it back in up here for x, and make sure that you get an average of 22. You can also go back up to this original one and figure out if our 6 side length was 27, would we get an average of 22? So I want you, one of those two ways right now, I want you to check your answer. Okay, you should have gotten that yes, it worked. It did end up being an average. Okay. Those are all the examples that we're going to do today. So write down any questions that you might have and make sure that you come to class ready to practice.